Questions to the Prime Minister. Ian Murray.
Number one, please, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others, and in addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Ian Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Prime Minister, when the Chancellor said in his first budget, "When we mean we are all in this together, we mean it." When the Prime Minister and the Chancellor came up with such a vacuous soundbite, did they do so before they decided to give a £42,000 a year tax cut to millionaires, or before they attempted and failed, or before they attempted and failed to eliminate the deficit on the back of the poorest?
Well, the fact is, the honourable gentleman cannot hide from the statistics that show that inequality is down, poverty is down, 3 million of the poorest people have been taken out of income tax altogether, and most importantly, we've created jobs for tens of thousands of our fellow countrymen and women. And today we see the unemployment statistics with a record number of people in work, and in his constituency, which I thought he would want to welcome, the claimant count has fallen since the election in his constituency by 49%. That's what's happened. That's how we're beating poverty.
Mr. Chris Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When this government took office, metal theft was rife, especially in the Black Country. This government listened to the all-party parliamentary group on combating metal theft, banned cash payments and banned the Scrap Metal Dealers Act. Once he's been returned for another term as Prime Minister, what more will my right honourable friend do to ensure that instances of this abhorrent crime reduce further still, so that no more church roofs get horrendously damaged and no more trains get stopped in their tracks as a result of sheer greed?
My honourable friend is absolutely right. This is an important line of crime that's been increasing, not least because of the value of this scrap metal. The church on the Whitney roof, on the Whitney church in my constituency, has been stolen. So what we have done is that we have made sure scrap metal dealers are required to hold licences. Councils can revoke a licence at any time. We've banned cash payments to purchase scrap metal, and we've provided £6 million additional funding for a dedicated national metal task force. What I will do if re-elected is make sure the police continue to have the powers and the ability to crack down on this abhorrent crime.
Ed Miliband.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister promised before the last election no top-down reorganisation of the NHS. In the words of the chairman of the Conservative Party, would he describe this as an over-denial or simply a straightforward broken promise?
What we did is we took the bureaucracy out of the NHS. Yes, we made two big decisions. Big decision number one was to put more money in, and big decision number two was to take the bureaucracy out. That is why we have 9,500 more doctors, 7,500 more nurses. I can see the Shadow Chancellor chuckling. We know the Shadow Chancellor wants to be in the kitchen cabinet. He just doesn't know which kitchen to turn up to.
Somehow, Mr. Speaker, I thought he might mention kitchens. Let me just say, at least I paid for my kitchen, unlike the government chief whip. Now, let's go back to the NHS. So, first broken promise on top-down reorganisation. Next, he said, I refuse to go back to the days when people had to wait for hours on end to be seen in A&E. Now we learn the NHS will miss the 4-hour A&E target for the whole of this year for the first time ever. Why did he break that promise?
Well, which of his kitchens did he pay for? I think we deserve an answer. No, look, I do feel sorry. I feel sorry for the Leader of the Opposition. He literally doesn't know where his next meal's coming from. Oh, don't worry, there's plenty more. He asked about accident emergency. So far this year, 93.7% of people have been seen within the 4 hours. I want us to do better. We'll bring together the health and social care to make that happen. But we made a promise, which is that we would put £12.7 billion into the NHS. They said it was irresponsible. We invested in our health service.
That's another broken promise on accident and emergency. Now let's turn to cancer. On cancer, he said, the key issue was how long people had to wait to get treatment. But the NHS is missing the 62-day treatment target. Why did he break that promise?
Well, let me bring him closer to home, and this genuinely the home in Doncaster. This is the answer. Here are the cancer waiting times for his constituents. 95.2% of patients with suspected cancer were seen by a specialist within 2 weeks, and the target is 93%. Target met. 97.9% of patients diagnosed with cancer began treatment within 30 days. The target is 96%. Target met. 87% of patients began cancer treatment within 62 days of an urgent GP referral. Target 85%. Target met. The fact is, on the NHS, we put in the investment, we increased the doctors, we increased the nurses, and frankly, if he can't stand the heat, he better get out of his second kitchen.
Speaker, I think that was a long-winded way of saying he's broken his promises on the NHS. Now, let's turn to another one of his promises. He promised a bare-knuckle fight to stop the closure of A&E and maternity units. He even did photo calls outside the hospitals whose units then closed. Why did he break the promise?
I'm very glad he has raised this issue, because at a previous Prime Minister's questions, he stood there and produced a list of, I believe, 27 hospitals, 7 of which were shut under a Labour government. That is how incompetent he is as leader of the opposition. Just imagine what mess he'd make if he was running the country.
Great, Mr. Speaker, because I've got a photo of him here, Chase Farm Hospital. This is what he said. If you call an election on November the 1st, we'll stop the closure of services on this hospital on November the 2nd. Then he closed the services. That is what happened on his watch. Now, since the last election, he's broken his health service promises on waiting times, cancer treatment, A&E, and on the top-down reorganisation. When he makes a whole series of new NHS promises, why on earth should anyone believe him?
I tell you why people should believe us, because we have the strong economy that can deliver the strong NHS. We promised more money for our NHS. Promise delivered. We promised more nurses for our NHS. Promise delivered. We promised more doctors for our NHS. Promise delivered. We said that we would sort out the mixed-sex wards, the hospital-acquired infections. Promise delivered. But isn't it interesting, Mr. Speaker? 5 questions and not one mention of the unemployment figures today. He cannot bear the fact that the employment rate in our country is at a record level. There are a record number of people in work, a record number of women in work, there are a record number of vacancies. That's what this country is delivering, a strong economy that builds a strong NHS.
People are worse off, and the NHS is worse off on his watch, and that's why working families cannot afford another 5 years of him. And everybody knows the NHS cannot survive another 5 years of this government. The NHS was built by Labour, saved by Labour, and will only be safe in the hands of the next Labour government.
There is only one government in the history of the NHS that cut the NHS, and it was the last Labour government in the 70s. They did it because they lost control of the economy. Every forecast he has made about the economy has been wrong. He said there'd be no jobs. We have record jobs. He said we wouldn't cut the deficit. The deficit is down. He said there wouldn't be growth. We got the strongest growth for any major Western economy. He has made misjudgment after misjudgment on every single question. We talk about our long-term economic plan because it's about changing lives. It's about jobs. It's about livelihoods. It's about giving people the chance of security. That is what will be on the ballot paper in 50 days' time, and they will never trust him with the future of our country.
Jesse Norman! Jesse Norman! The Honourable Gentleman not here. Sir Malcolm Bruce!
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that the best prospect for the people of Scotland is to be a successful part of a growing United Kingdom, and that Alex Salmond's mission to shake this House to its foundations will deny recovery, jobs, mortgages and threaten both the UK and Scotland, which is why the people of Gordon are uniting to deny his return to this House?
Well, I think my honourable friend makes an important point, which is what the SNP want is to break up our country. And that is why it's so appalling that although he's now said he doesn't want a formal pact with the SNP, he will not rule out a confidence and supply agreement. He won't rule out relying on the SNP in vote after vote after vote, making sure that they would get the advantage and people in England and Wales and Northern Ireland would be let down. Yes, we rule it out. Look, I know he wants to. I know that. Look, what I'd say to the Shadow Chancellor is that his boss threw both his kitchen sinks at the NHS and he still couldn't win.
Theresa Pearce. Order! I say to honourable members on the opposition benches, their honourable friend must be heard. Theresa Pearce.
1 in 4 patients are waiting over a week for a GP appointment, and some are waiting 2 weeks in my constituency. A third can't even get through on the phone. And yet we have 23% of London GPs due to quit the NHS in the next 5 years. Will the Prime Minister take responsibility for the increasing crisis in GPs on his watch?
Well, what I'd say to the Honourable Lady is nationwide we have 1,000 more GPs in the NHS. In her own constituency, there are 8 more GPs compared with 2010. There are 317 more GPs in the London area. And the Royal College of GPs, who's often criticised this government, has said actually now there's never been a better time to go into general practice.
James Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Black Country economy in the West Midlands has been one of the fastest growing local economies of any region in the United Kingdom over the last 2 years, with more investment in manufacturing, new high-skilled jobs, more exporting and better opportunities for local people in my constituency. Would the Prime Minister agree with me that as part of our long-term economic plan, that the people in the Black Country can be proud of this industrial revival and be proud and confident to say that things are made in the Black Country and sold around the world?
My honourable friend makes an important point, and it is actually a remarkable statistic that growth value added in the Black Country has actually grown faster than in any other local enterprise partnership area in the entire country. And if you compare that with what happened in the so-called boom years of the 2000s, when actually private sector employment in the West Midlands actually went down rather than up, it shows that we are seeing a genuinely national recovery. Huge credit must go to Jaguar Land Rover, who in the last 5 years have tripled their turnover, doubled their sales and doubled their workforce. Manufacturing in Britain is growing again, growing in the West Midlands, and we should be proud of that.
Natasha Engel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In January, John Smedley and Clay Cross announced it was making 21 seamstresses redundant. It took nearly 2 months before somebody from the Job Centre's Rapid Response team went in to see these women. The response was unsympathetic, unhelpful and anything but rapid. What has happened to Rapid Response? And what's happened to Rapid Response? And why have these workers been so badly let down?
Well, I agree with the Honourable Lady. It is important that Job Centre Plus is there to help employees when they're let go by their employers. That's what they're there for. Generally speaking, I hear very good reports of what they do. Of course, in her constituency, the claimant count has come down in the last year by 29%, so the overall economic picture is good. I will certainly look at the specific case and see if Job Centre Plus needs any form of a boost. But the fact is, jobs are being created, the vacancies are there, and she talks about seamstresses. In terms of the garment industry, we're actually seeing production being brought back onshore in Britain. That's very good news.
Karen Lumley.
The unemployment count in Redditch at the end of the year had fallen below 850 for the first time since 2005. Does my right honourable friend agree with me it would be catastrophic for Redditch, hard-working people in Redditch, if it was undone by the party opposite?
I thank the honourable lady for her question. Today's figures are remarkable. We see employment up by 1.89 million since the election. We used to talk about creating 2 million private sector jobs. It's now 2.3 million private sector jobs. And another figure that is fresh out today is that the youth claimant count is now at its lowest rate since the 1970s, 40 years ago. In Redditch, the claimant count has fallen by 63% since the election, and the youth claimant count down by 39% in the last year alone. The plan is working, and it's not just dry and dusty statistics. This is about people getting a job, getting a livelihood, getting security, and that's what we want to keep going.
Jim Sheridan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister will be well aware of the hard work that went in to the Smith Agreement. And he will be disappointed, as I am, to see the front page of the Daily Record today showing 4 councillors, SNP councillors, burning that very agreement. Not only did they escape discipline, but one of them was actually promoted. Are these the actions of a party who seeks to increase its representation in this place?
I think the honourable gentleman makes an important point, which is the Smith process and the Smith agreement was about bringing together different political parties who often disagree with each other quite violently about issues, but to come to the right answer for the future of Scotland and the future of devolution. It was an excellent report. We're all committed to putting it in place, whoever is the government after the next election, and it is disappointing that the SNP, who only want to break up our country, won't stick to the promises that they've made.
Mr. Duncan Hames.
Mr. Speaker, last June I asked the Prime Minister if he was satisfied with police investigations into organised child sexual abuse. By November, the Home Secretary acknowledged that years ago there might have been a cover-up, and this week we learned that the Met themselves have identified as many as 14. Now that we have a judge-led inquiry, is it not time that we treated this scandal as, in the words of the Independent Police Complaints Commission, high-level corruption of the most serious nature? It went to the very core of the British state.
I think my honourable friend is right to say how serious this is, and it's right that there is not only an IPCC investigation into what happened in the police force, but also a separate part of the Metropolitan Police are carrying out an in-depth investigation, Operation Fairbank, into what happened. Added to that, we've now got the overarching Justice Goddard review to look at institutional failings in terms of discovering child sexual abuse. What I would say to him, and I know others in the House who are very interested in this issue, is that we will do everything we can to get to the bottom of what happened, and anyone who is worried about whether people will be prosecuted under the Official Secrets Act for coming forward with information should be reassured by the assurances that have been given by the Attorney General and the Home Secretary. It's in everybody's interest we get absolutely to the bottom of what happened, and if people should be punished for their failures, they should be.
Fiona McTaggart.
The Prime Minister, when he answered the Leader of the Opposition, was able to show that the cancer waiting targets had been met in his constituency. They obviously have a very effective Member of Parliament. But actually, the Prime Minister is responsible for the National Health Service as a whole. And he will be aware that nationally, the 62-day wait for treatment for cancer patients after referral has been breached in each of the last 4 quarters. So what does he have to say to the over 5,000 cancer patients, including 1 in 4 people with bowel or lung cancer, who are waiting months before they get any treatment?
I would say, look, everybody in this House, me included, knows people who have been affected by cancer and have died of cancer. And this government has put an enormous amount of effort, as previous ones have done. I will answer the question. I will answer the question very directly, right? And we have made sure.
Order! Members must hear the answer. It must. Order! I said it a moment ago to the other side. The Prime Minister must be heard. The right honourable gentleman.
Make sure that 500,000 more people have been referred for cancer treatment, and as a result, cancer survival rates are going up. Now, I do think it's worthwhile, as well as looking at the national figures, looking at the constituency figures, and I have her figures here. She's obviously a very effective MP too, because in her area they are meeting all 3 of the cancer targets. targets. That's what's happening in Britain. More people referred, more resources going in, more people surviving, but more to be done. But let me remind her, this can only happen with a strong economy. It's when the Labour Party wrecked the economy that they wrecked the health service.
Sir Peter Bottomley!
My right honourable friend has made the point that it's the economy which makes the health service funding possible. Yes. Can he tell the House what has happened to employment, to inflation and to the rate of the minimum wage over the last 5 years?
Well, what I can tell him is that the minimum wage yesterday, the announcement was made that it should increase from £6.50 to £6.70, which is a real terms increase. Now, of course, after the great Labour recession, we didn't have increases in the minimum wage. It lost its value. But under this government, you're seeing the minimum wage go up. And the guarantee I can give to him, if we keep increasing the minimum wage at the rate it is being increased now, it will get to beyond £8 by the subsequent election. So Labour's proposal for an £8 minimum wage will mean a cut in the minimum wage. It is like so many of their other policies, like their university tuition fees policy, as someone said today, that the first example in political history where you get less for more.
To Michael Connaughton.
Mr. Speaker, my neighbour Helen lived for many years with degenerative multiple sclerosis in her own home until she died, sadly, because of the Independent Living Fund. How can the Prime Minister and this government morally justify taking away the Independent Living Fund from the most disabled people in our communities so they may end up being institutionalised and not independent?
Well, as he knows, what we've done is devolve the funding for the Independent Living Fund, but we've also maintained the vitally important disability benefits, like the Disability Living Allowance, which has been uprated every year in line with inflation.
John Howell.
Does my right honourable friend agree with me that our long-term economic plan is doing an outstanding job in my constituency? Unemployment now stands at 269, making it the best performance of any constituency in the country. And will he join with me in thanking those firms that I visited last week in Tame who are running fantastic apprenticeship schemes and the young people who are joining them?
I'm certainly doing that. I'm delighted that unemployment is so low in his constituency. The facts are that these latest figures show that the UK's employment rate has seen the largest rise of any G7 country over the last year. Today, there are nearly 1 million fewer people on the main out-of-work benefits and nearly 2 million more people in work in our country. More young people have got into work in the UK over the last year than in the rest of the European Union put together. Those are the benefits of having a long-term economic plan, sticking to a long-term economic plan, and ignoring the hopeless advice from the party opposite.
Ian Lavery.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Despite the Prime Minister's fine words and rhetoric, his government's cost of living crisis has hammered many families in the North East. We've got tens of thousands public sector jobs butchered. We've got unemployment the highest level in the UK. We've got weekly earnings £71 less than the national average and a life expectancy of 10 years less than anywhere else in the country. Isn't that time the Prime Minister showed some guts and apologised to the people in the North East?
Well, first of all, let's look at what's happened in his own constituency. Right? The claimant count has fallen in the last year by 28%, more than a quarter. The youth claimant count in the last year alone, not for the whole of the government, but last year alone, a 32% fall. I thought this was the party that said how important it was to get young people off the dole and into work. That's what this government's done. Now, unemployment has fallen in every region of the country. If we take the North East, it's fallen by 21,000 over the last year. That is what is happening. We're creating jobs, we're generating growth, we're taking the poorest people out of tax altogether. 3 million nationwide. The party opposite say calm down. I can't calm down when I see the success that our long-term economic plan is generating. We've got 50 days to make sure that the people who delivered this plan can go on delivering the plan instead of the people who would wreck it.
Mr. Nigel Evans.
On that theme, BAE Systems, who manufacture world-beating military jets, announced that they're to set up a training academy in the Ribble Valley, upskilling the current workforce and also bringing on new talent via their ambitious apprenticeship scheme. Will the Prime Minister welcome the £15.6 million investment in this training academy? And next year, when it opens, will he come and visit the Samlesbury site in his continuing capacity as the Prime Minister of our great country?
I'm very grateful for the invitation. I was at BAE's other main site in the northwest, the Wharton site, last week as a celebration of National Apprenticeship Week, and looking at the training and the skills that they're delivering. They are hiring 440 apprentices this year, which is a record for BAE Systems that is doing very well under this government. This is absolutely vital work. We've delivered 2 million apprentices in this Parliament. We aim to deliver 3 million in the next Parliament, and these manufacturing apprenticeships are particularly vital. So yes, I'll certainly take him up on the invitation to come and open this excellent academy.
Mr. Keith Vaz.
Mr. Speaker, last Saturday, the Prime Minister spoke at the unveiling of the magnificent Mahatma Gandhi statue in Parliament Square.
Yes.
I observed him in deep conversation with Arun Jaitley, the Indian Finance Minister, and Amitabh Bachchan, its greatest actor. Which man offered him the best advice for the next election? Was it the person who presented a budget that will affect a sixth of humanity, or an actor whose acting tips might well help the Prime Minister in the TV debates?
Well, I'm very grateful that the Honourable Gentleman was able to attend this beautiful ceremony, a superb statue, and a great turnout of members of Parliament, of school children and others to see this extraordinary statue. And I think it's quite right that Mahatma Gandhi stands there alongside Churchill, alongside Mandela, in such an important square for our nation. In terms of the advice I was given, these were all private conversations, so I won't delve too far into them. All I would say is I think the new Indian government and the reforms that they're making, opening up the Indian economy, will only make sure that the relationship between our countries becomes stronger still.
Mr. Paul Uppal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just over a fortnight ago, the Secretary of State for Transport visited Wolverhampton and reached the conclusion that I and almost every resident in the city has, that the station is desperately in need of an upgrade. Locally, Centro, working with developer Neptune, have come up with an innovative deal which is £80 million and 1,300 jobs to make sure that we continue investment in the city. Would my right honourable friend use his offices along with the DfT to ensure that Wolverhampton not only gets a station, but we actually increase industrial renaissance in the West Midlands that we have for the last 5 years?
Well, first of all, let me pay tribute to my honourable friend for the incredibly hard work that he has put in to campaign for this station, and I can tell him that following the visit of the Secretary of State for Transport, there is £13.5 million that's been secured through the local transport and growth deal to fund this project. It's because of his hard work that this is going ahead. It's absolutely essential that Wolverhampton benefits from good road, rail and other infrastructure connections so that it can benefit from the growth we're seeing in our country.
Liz McInnes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister has a record of looking the other way when it comes to allegations of wrongdoing in his own team. He did it with Andy Coulson, and he's doing it now with the Honourable Member for Welwyn and Hatfield. Can the Prime Minister explain why he has been so quick to rule out an investigation into his own party chairman?
I would have thought, really, with all the things that are happening in the part of the world that she represents, she could come up with a better question. My right honourable friend has acknowledged that he made a mistake, but his entry in the registered member of interest was correct. So I really think she is barking up the wrong tree. But while I'm here, I'm sure she'll want to welcome that in her constituency the claimant count has fallen by 54% since the last election.
David Morris.
I would like to thank the Prime Minister for steering this country in the past 5 years through economic waters never seen before caused by the previous Labour government. And would he also agree with me that 765,000 people have started up their businesses since 2010, which is the highest quota ever since the 1980s, and would he agree with me that this is a good thing, not like the Labour Party say a collapse in the labour market that they caused?
I think my honourable friend is absolutely right. Of course, of the jobs created over the last year, something like 95% of them have been employees in businesses. But we've seen in our country a really big increase in entrepreneurialism, in businesses being started up, lighting the fires of enterprise. This is absolutely vital because these individuals will go on and build great companies, build our industrial base and provide the jobs of the future. And yes, he's right. So often in this House we talk about our growing economy and never hear one word of regret for the people who crashed the car in the first place.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This week it was revealed that a second criminal inquiry into former member of this House, Sir Cyril Smith, was closed down by senior police officers. I believe there will be other examples of cover-up yet to be revealed. Notwithstanding the reassurances of the Home Secretary, will the Prime Minister please give a cast-iron guarantee that former public officials with knowledge of the cover-ups are given full whistleblower protections?
No, I'm grateful the honourable gentleman has asked this question because I think it comes down to three separate questions, because there's this concern about whether people would be prosecuted under the Official Secrets Act. Now, in terms of people giving evidence to the Goddard review, Justice Goddard is perfectly able to ask the Attorney-General, as has happened with all previous commissions of inquiry of this type, to make sure that no one can incriminate themselves when they give evidence, and I'm sure that will happen. In terms of giving evidence to the IPCC inquiry, the Home Secretary has given very clear guidance on that issue, and in terms of disclosing to the press, the Attorney-General said very recently it would be highly unlikely that it would ever be in the public interest for someone who did that, revealing wrongdoing, to be subject to prosecution. I'm absolutely clear. I don't want to see anyone prosecuted for uncovering wrongdoing in this way, and I hope he will take that in the spirit in which it's meant.
Order.